Hey guys, Kingpin here. Welcome to the next episode of Franchise Mode. In case you missed the last episode, we actually name-dropped the zoo for the very first time. Welcome to the H2O Zone. I really like the name because it combines two of our zoo's main themes, H2O being a water-based zoo with a lot of aquatic animals, and ozone, atmosphere. This alludes to the zoo being eco-friendly, which we've tried very hard to make it. We don't have any transformers, we don't have anything that negatively impacts the environment, and we're trying to keep all solar power and all wind turbines as our primary source of power. Recently, in the past 2 or 3 episodes, we've been working on our North American side of the zoo, more of the eco-friendly and less of the aquatic theme of the zoo. But the first animal that you're going to see when you walk in here is the common raccoon, and we have 3 of them in here. And is my eyes mistaken me? Because it looks like that one's swimming. I've never seen them do that before. Interesting. I didn't know they had that animation. Guess it makes sense why they needed so much water. Coming out of here, you'll see Timberwolf Cave, and you can actually hear them, right on cue. I didn't add that in post or anything. We added that nice river up ahead. They have a very pretty looking cave on the inside, and if you travel outside of the exhibit, you'll see their main bulk of their area. They have a little pond over here. They have a pretty mountainous and hilly region filled with plenty of different plant species. Not quite sure what's going to go in here, but it comes after the Fruit Bat Cavern, which you can actually walk through, and it'll lead you straight back into the Timberwolf Cave. I'm a big fan of how this exhibit turned out. Walkthrough exhibits were a little bit daunting, because I'd never done one before, but I'm pretty happy with my first attempt. Matter of fact, we've actually been researching these guys so we can add a few new things in. Let's see where these fruit things ended up. Looks like we have a fruit spike tree right there. Looks like another one over there. And where are these apple? There they are. I bet the fruit bats will enjoy that a great amount. Hopefully they can breed and have lots of babies. Our barriers are damaged. That must be because our mechanics have been actively researching more Twilight packs, and we actually started researching the Indian packs too. Hopefully we can add some really cool new pieces to the zoo. Today, however, we're going to be doing an exhibit more alike to the aquatic theme of the zoo, like this gray seal enclosure. Matter of fact, it's actually going to be right across the way from the gray seal enclosure. I'm a big fan of how this one turned out in particular. The underwater viewing is gorgeous, and today we're actually going to be doing the California sea lion. Very closely related species and very similar to the gray seal, but with a few key differences. We'll talk about that in time, but first let's get to the exhibit. Starting off on the underside of the exhibit, we're going to put 4 little stadium seats that follow the path on the bottom side. This will pair nicely with the guest education speech that's going to be given. On the left side, we're going to have a small little building that gives the illusion of being underwater viewing, but it's actually not. We don't want to be too similar to the gray seals. And other than that, there's just going to be a small little pier on the top left, with the staff area being on the right side. Before we start building the sea lion enclosure, we need to add some work zones into our zoo. In order to find them, just go to the staff menu. They're on the right. Once you click that, you'll be taken to this little menu, and every single facility in the zoo is going to be red. What you want to do at the work zone is try to highlight areas that are around similar locations. For example, now we're going to do our gray seal, Arctic fox, and penguins. We also need to find some keeper huts and some staff rooms too. What this is going to do is limit where keepers can and can't go. The reason you want to do this is because your zoo is going to run a lot more efficiently. Imagine if we had 2 exhibits in this zoo that needed tending to, the timber wolves and the gray seals. They're on opposite sides of the zoo, but with work zones, now that'll never happen. Once you try to make a second work zone, your first one is going to appear orange or potentially a different color. Now we're making a second work zone. We can have the same work zone overlap. For example, now that work zones 1 and 2 are both affecting these staff rooms, they're going to appear blue. Work zone 2 is now green, and work zone 1 is now orange. So the keepers that we assign to work zone 1 are only ever going to go into work zone 1 highlighted enclosures. This is just going to make the zoo run a lot more efficiently, and help the staff out a lot. I recommend doing it. The California sea lion was actually the very first animal I ever made an exhibit for on this channel. The very first animal I ever made an exhibit for, period, I think was the beaver, but that was before I even considered doing Planet Zoo on YouTube at all. So, I really want to do this exhibit justice because I really like the animal, and as dumb as it sounds, it's a bit nostalgic despite the game only being out for like 2.5 to 3 months. Aside from making an extremely good and detailed exhibit, my main goal for this habitat is to differentiate it from the gray seal enclosure we made in episode 3. The gray seal and California sea lion are admittedly relatively similar animals, and they have similar habitats too, just on varying coasts of America and North America in general, but they are different animals, so we want to have differences in their exhibit despite keeping it looking, detailed-wise, the exact same. The main way we're going to accomplish this is by having the entire exhibit be above ground. The gray seal enclosure has underwater viewing and a pier on top. This is also going to have a pier on top, but what I did differently in this exhibit is I dug a small hole about 2 meters deep, and I'm going to have the glass on top be also 2 meters tall. Therefore, the animals will be able to deep dive, but the glass isn't going to look like a giant building. It's just going to look like a tank that's only 2 meters deep. But in reality, it's going to be 4 because we dug this hole. This is a good way to sell the effect that the exhibit's actually smaller than it is, because the sea lions are going to need 4 meters to do their deep dive animation, which is one of their habitat requirements. This was an easy way to make it look good, and be beneficial too, to the sea lions. After I dug the pit, the next most challenging thing in this entire exhibit was to get this very unique shape for the front of the tank. The trick that I found worked best using the regular glass was switching between the curved and the straight sections and varying the amount of distance between each panel. I wanted it to look pretty similar, although if it was a meter or 2 off, nobody's gonna care. But for example, right there were 2 like little stick post things in the glass that differentiate the panels, and I didn't really like that. I want to have as few of them as possible, and where they are, I want them to be symmetrical. After that, I decided to use concrete just to fill in the blank spots, because that also is going to be able to hold water. We're going to come in a minute and add a giant mountain to the back of it that acts as a slope to where the sea lions can have some above ground area to get away from the surface of the water, and also to fill their habitat requirements. This will be a really easy way to do it. It'll be like a little beach, and then they can just slide down into the ocean. Just like the gray seals, California sea lions are not very good climbers. They cannot have a whole lot of elevation in their exhibit unless they can swim. If they can swim through it, it means absolutely nothing. It's pretty much them flying. But they can't have any elevation that involves them climbing even a little bit. The most that they could do is probably a couple of feet up and down. Other than that, you have to have very easy slopes into the water. Aside from that, this exhibit was relatively easy to make. All it is just standard glass, some concrete, and some null barriers. Null barriers can get a little bit confusing, but just treat them like normal barriers as long as there's something blocking the animal from getting out. If you guys wanted to, I could do an entire tutorial series on null barriers specifically, because they really are the big learning gap in this game. If you use null barriers, your exhibits are going to be really good. If you don't use null barriers, you have a long way to go in this game. It really is probably the most complex part of building in this game, at least exhibit-wise, and if you want to progress and become better at the game, you've got to learn how to use them. As I said before, I've already made an exhibit for sea lions in the past, and it turned out relatively similar to this. The last one I made was definitely bigger, but it was almost a little too big to be a good exhibit overall. I'm really a big fan of the scale of how this one turned out, but I already knew what I was getting into. Sea lions are kind of a tricky animal to start with in a zoo, so I wouldn't really recommend them. They're expensive to feed, but the one thing that they are really nice at is that they don't require any hard shelter. A lot of aquatic mammals don't need any hard shelter, which is nice, but the one thing that I didn't do correctly in this exhibit was their traversable area. I made the sides a little bit too steep, even though I made specially sure to say not to do that. Other than that, they just needed some sand, a little bit of terrain reworking, and it was easy. I always like to build everything out of dark soil when I start, just so it looks a little bit like a construction site, and it makes it easier to kind of visualize where I'm building everything. The only con to this is that typically the animals are going to start off with really bad wellness because no animal in the game, to my knowledge, likes only soil. So that's just something that's a little nitpick of this strategy, but it does look nice. If you look in the time-lapse, you can see exactly where I'm planning to build in this episode because it's where the soil is. It's a pretty convenient tactic. I'd recommend you guys try it. Overall, what we're doing now is just placing some very basic enrichment items down. Seals and sea lions alike are pretty intelligent animals, so they need a lot to be happy. A lot of food, a lot of different toys, and don't forget to add this to the work zone if you guys are following along too. Once the enrichment was completely down and the sea lion exhibit was perfect from a statistical point of view, not detailed obviously, that'll come later, I decided then to start working on the bleachers, little stadium seats for a sea lion show. I thought this would be a great area to put this. It's something I've wanted to add to the zoo for a while, but I really haven't had the time, not necessarily the time, I really haven't had the space to build this. I wanted to do it for the gray seal enclosure, but I wasn't quite sure where it would go. I eventually decided to stick with 4 rows of the bleachers like this, and then just redo the path. It was a simple solution, and we'll come back here with some rocks and make this blend in later, but for now, what's important is that we got it down. I'll explain exactly how to work these things later because they can be a little bit complicated, but just know if you want to do this, you're going to need at least 1 set of bleachers and an animal talking point. You have to link them and do some other complicated stuff, but we'll talk about that later, like I just said. Other than that, just some basic donation bins, changing up the path a little bit, and overall just making sure the sea lions are happy in their new home. The guests seem to agree because the tickets were underpriced again. Usually I use the blueprint where it's the freestanding board on the 2 legs, but I decided this time to stick the education boards right to the side. The only thing you have to do is make sure they're the right way, because that is completely upside down. Easy fix though. Just grab it and rotate it 180 degrees. I almost said 90 degrees, but that would have been wrong. One thing I really want to do better in this zoo, in all of my zoos going forward, is change up what path that I'm using. I use the exact same gray asphalt for a lot of different things, and while it works for pavilions and walkways and areas like that, I want to change what path I'm using for areas that are going to be on the interior of buildings, or maybe bridges, and other areas where the path might not necessarily be just asphalt. For example, right now we're going to be building a small little building. That probably wasn't the best way to word that. But anyways, we're going to be building a small structure that the guests can walk in to get some shade and look like the sea lions are going to be viewing underwater. In reality, this is no different than the other side of the enclosure, and it's just going to be a little creative room the guests can have a better view of the animals in. It was an extremely easy build, surprisingly. All I did was use the new painted wood that came in the aquatic pack, run a little line on the outside of the path, and then cover up some of the glass with a different color of the wood. This way, it looks like I made 2 walls, when in reality one of them is just a simple barrier, so the guests won't walk through it, even without the little guest curves. Other than that, I made a different group, threw on a roof, called it a day. If you've made it this far into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. The channel's growing really good, and we're so close to 700 subscribers. I bet we can get there by the end of a week. Maybe another 2 weeks, but I'm really happy with the channel growth how it is. Keep up the support, guys, and I'll keep up the content. I promise. We're not going anywhere. After we finished construction on our little building where guests can view the sea lions from, I decided to throw on a little plaster trim along the glass. I did this for 2 reasons. One, it adds a little bit more color, and it's slightly different because we're going to put some more of the faux rocks in, and we're going to blend the color into these pillars. We needed 2 different things that were gray, not just one, and I wanted this to look a little bit more official and not make it out of rocks. I thought that would look a little bit out of place in this zoo. We want this to look modern after all. And the second reason I did it was because it added a little bit of layering and a little bit of depth to the build. Depth is the most important thing you can have in a build, arguably there with layering, but one could argue that those two are the exact same thing in terms of a build. All this does is make the thing not look very straight. It adds little curves, little nicks, little dings. It adds just a bit of character to a build. It doesn't entirely look perfect, and it's not entirely a straight line that comes off of it. It hangs off the top. It has a little bit of negative space. It looks really nice in my opinion. If you just use the in-game barriers or just use a straight line, it'll pretty much look fake. You want to have your exhibits look like they're made out of numerous parts, but also make them look pretty official. So try to have a rhythm with your build. Try to add things in specific patterns that look deliberate. Try to add things that make sense in your build. For example, next, we're going to go through the things from the aquatic pack and add these little barriers so the seals wouldn't be able to jump out of the water. Sea lions, I'm sorry. I've probably said that numerous times in the video, I just caught myself. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Details are extremely important in a build, but you have to make your details make sense. Try to connect these little things that stops the sea lion from jumping out, instead of just having them scattered all over the place. It wouldn't make much sense to have these if there was just a completely different place the sea lion could jump out of the enclosure. So you have to do the job right. If you're going to add a detail, you have to go all the way. Overall, I would say this was an incredibly easy technique. Pretty much all I did was use the advanced move menu to get these things touching each other. In areas where they weren't touching entirely, you can kind of cheat and add a different block in there later. It's really not that difficult. I know this because if I can do it, I bet you guys can build something way cooler. The H2O zone is only getting started. So far the complexity meter is barely above 20%, so just imagine what we've done times 5. That's the grand plan of this zoo. I've got a few plans for animals coming from the future. I really want to do some sort of reptiles soon, and I'm thinking in the next episode we finally add the flamingos to the center. That area has been empty for far too long, and that would take a lot of stress off of our Arctic foxes, which we all know they need it. All that's left to do for the main habitat, not the detailing outside, that'll come next, which also is going to be a lot more difficult, but all that we have to do left for the interior is pretty much exactly what we did for the gray seals. Matter of fact, we're using the exact same faux rock thing that we designed over there. I copy and pasted it over using the multi-select feature. If you recall from that episode, pretty much all we had to do was just line the outside of it to make a natural seawall. It's a really easy technique, and it really blends together the two techniques that we've used so far. I really like the effect, too. It makes the underground and underwater look a lot more natural with the rocks everywhere. Unlike what we did for the gray seal enclosure, I then decided to use the faux rocks to line the bottom of the pool. I thought this made for a much more interesting effect, and it made it look a lot more natural in my opinion. I kind of liked how the gray seals turned out with it was just sand on the bottom, but I don't know, a part of me likes the rocks on the seafloor as well. I keep flip-flopping. Other than that, all we had to do to finish was just line the outside. We've never had to use one of these animal talk points yet. We haven't had a good section to put it in the zoo. But if you do it, make sure you change the education to the animal that you want to talk about and then hit link seating. Then, find your little stadium seats, link them all up, and confirm it. It's that easy. You can then set the month, and whatever month it's set at, ours right now is July, there'll be an animal talk show here and the guest will fill the stands. You don't necessarily have to link the seating, but I would recommend if you have seats to not allow standing to avoid giant crowds around the area. It makes it look a little bit better. I would also recommend you stay seated for the next few minutes of the video, because we're going to be talking a lot about the California sea lions, and they're pretty interesting animals. California sea lions are found along the western coast of North America, all the way from Alaska, all the way down to Mexico, and they prefer rocky and sandy beaches, often forming giant colonies called rookeries. They have very sleek, almost torpedo-like bodies with external ear flaps and very large eyes, adapted for underwater vision. Adult males are called bulls and can weigh up to 850 pounds and reach lengths of up to 8 feet long. If you'll recall from the gray seal episode, they have extremely similar builds, including extremely similar max size, although one thing, if you do remember, is gray seals actually don't have external ears. Sea lions do, and this is because seals are extremely adapted for underwater mobility. This is because the drag from the ears would slow them down. To compensate for this, sea lions have external ears, which makes them slightly slower in the water, but also much more alert to predators sneaking up on them. Another key difference between seals and sea lions is while seals are pretty much immobile on land and can only bounce around, sea lions, while nowhere near fast on land, still can move at pretty high speeds compared to their seal counterparts. They're much more adept to moving in both land and water, while seals are faster in water but much slower on land. Overall, I would say sea lions are more mobile of the two. California sea lions are very social animals, just like the gray seal. They form large groups both on land and at sea. They communicate with distinctive barking vocalizations and are known for their very playful behavior and have been seen surfing on waves. Sea lions and seals alike are opportunistic feeders, preying on a variety of fish and squid species. They hunt alone or cooperatively in small groups and may follow fishing boats to feed on discarded catches. They're smart enough to see humans as a potential source of food. Not to eat the humans, of course, but humans are intelligent enough to actually give the seals their scraps. As excellent divers, California sea lions can reach depths of up to 600 feet below the sea level and hold their breath for nearly 10 minutes. Their powerful front flippers propel them through the water with surprising grace. Breeding season for the California sea lion occurs from May to August. Dominant male bulls establish territories and defend them vigorously. Females give birth to only a single pup, which they care for intensively for about a year. While not currently endangered, California sea lions face threats from human activities like entanglement in fishing gear and habitat disturbance. Conservation efforts aim to protect their habitats and manage interactions with fisheries, but, like said before, they're not currently endangered, so the species is thriving. They demonstrate very adept problem-solving abilities and learning skills, both in the wild and in captivity. This intelligence likely aids them in adapting to changing environmental conditions, which is likely why the species is doing so well. They undertake seasonal migrations too, moving northward during the warmer months in the season in search of food-rich areas and returning southward as the temperature drops back down. They have to keep a relatively consistent body temperature. This is why they always are in search of warmer waters. They're not like seals, they don't have that giant layer of blubber. The California sea lion has very few natural predators due to their size and agility. However, they have to watch out for various shark species and orcas, also known as killer whales. Those are some of the most intelligent things on the planet, not even just in the ocean. So that is a pretty tough area for the California sea lion to contest. No animal on Earth can stand up to a pod of orcas. Seals and sea lions to me are interesting because they prove how evolution is such a fascinating topic to study. The adaptations seals and sea lions have undergone is really easy to see, and they're a perfect example of evolution. They obviously come from a common ancestor. Look at all the features that they share. They have relatively similar body shapes, extremely similar bone structures, and kind of occupy the same role in the ecosystem in their respective habitats on the east and west coast of America. However, where the gray seal, and most seal species specifically, adapted for the cold climate, using their blubber, using their thicker hide, and using a variety of other adaptations, including their underwater mobility, you can clearly tell that they weren't designed for warmer climates like the sea lion. The sea lion is adapted for warmer climates, which is why they migrate, they don't have a layer of blubber, among other adaptations. This is also why they're more mobile on land, too, because the sea lion could not afford to give up the ability to run, like the seal can. The seal, its main predator is in the water, and also polar bears, so a lot of the time while evading predators, they're going to be in the water and can't retreat to land. However, the sea lion, they've adapted the ability to run on land to avoid predators, because a lot of their predators are going to be chasing them up on the coast. It's fascinating to see where the evolutionary split is in these two species, because while being so similar, they are extremely different, because also while similar, they inhabit extremely different environments. A sea lion could not survive where a seal lives, and a seal likely couldn't survive for long where the sea lion calls home. This is exactly why animals evolve and adapt, to overcome changing environments. I can't wait to show you guys how the newest exhibit of the H2O zone turned out. I'm really happy with the California sea lion exhibit. If our Arctic foxes could not be stressed for 5 minutes, how are 4 of them stressed? We only have 3 of them. We've got to get these flamingos in here soon to take some pressure off of them. But before we get to that, you first walk in and see a Looney Balloons and a Just Memento store. Just a Memento. Hard for me to pronounce. You'll then walk over here, and you have the first viewing of the sea lion. You'll then climb these stairs and get up here to the pier, and just like the gray seal, you have a beautiful area where you can view them from above the water. It's nice to see them on the land, because you don't have a good view on the other side of them. After that, you can come back down here. There's only one way to get to the pier, and then you can go through this little indoor section. There's some education, some conservation, a little bit of rocks and decor in here, and the sea lions can get really close to the glass. It's a beautiful area to view them from. After that, you'll come to this more rocky area, where you can also view them from underwater, and for some reason a guest decided to throw trash on the floor despite there being a trash can like 5 feet away from here. This is where the guest education viewing is, and you can even hear the music if you listen closely. This is where the main shows are going to be. I'm pretty sure we have them set for July. I'm really happy with how this area turned out. I'm a huge fan of how the bleachers match the umbrellas. I thought that was a really creative decision. We left a little area where we can continue this section of the zoo, but for now this is all we have over here. Going back this way, this is the path where the gray seal enclosure used to be along, but we changed it a little bit. Now there's really nothing along this path, but once you get to the end of it, you can either turn left to get to the sea lion or turn right to go to the underwater of the gray seal. I thought that was cool. I'm really happy with where these two exhibits are located and how similar they look, and they look a little bit different. We have a pier versus more of just a lake. If you guys enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it, don't forget to like and subscribe. But that's all for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next out of the series. Kingpin out. See you then. Looking forward to it.